Oxytocin is this great bonding hormone, but beyond that, it is a hormone of longevity, of immune support. There's so much that we are just finding out about really the far-reaching powers of oxytocin as a neuropeptide hormone. And it's hard when you're in those deep, dark pits of despair and pain and emotional and/or physical pain. Best pharmacy in the world, that is our own body. When we can produce oxytocin the best way. Yeah, so oxytocin is actually the most important hormone in our body. I consider it the queen mother of all hormones because when oxytocin's in balance, everything else falls into order. And so we look at this, like when we think of oxytocin, we want to make sure we're not confusing it with oxycodone, the pain relieving hormone. But oxytocin, many women have received this in childbirth. They receive Pitocin, and that is exogenous oxytocin. That's pharmaceutical oxytocin that we inject to help stimulate labor. And naturally, when we're in labor, we produce oxytocin. It stimulates uterine contraction. It stimulates milk letdown. And it's part of that hormone that when you get through that childbirth, and I know you had a traumatic childbirth experience, but you get through that childbirth experience, all of a sudden, you're like, oh, maybe I can do this whole thing again. Maybe not. But oxytocin is that you look at this child and you're like, oh my gosh, I am bounded to this child. I will protect this child with my life. And there's a feeling of love that goes beyond anything that you ever experience. The same with oxytocin with a love partner, with sexual stimulation. And you're like, oh my gosh, maybe I really didn't like this guy, but now I had this great orgasm. I could see myself with him. So it can be a little misleading sometimes. But oxytocin is this great bonding hormone. But beyond that, it is a hormone of longevity, of immune support, of cognitive brain support, of cardiovascular support. There's so much that we are just finding out about really the far-reaching powers of oxytocin as a neuropeptide hormone.
Yes. This is I think of it as the hormone that we get when we get and give hugs, when we cuddle with our children and our loved ones. Like you mentioned, I think this is why sometimes women will bond onto a man that they maybe were just having a fling with, and it was supposed to be some kind of casual fling. And next thing they know, they're feeling serious emotions. That's oxytocin at work. And in my practice was, predominantly regenerative injection therapies and pain. So I used it a lot there for people, just in the realm of pain and trying to calm down the nervous system.
Yeah, because it's a potent analgesic. That's the part of even with childbirth, naturally forget the pains of childbirth. And it's an amnestic too. So between the analgesic and amnestic, you're like, oh yeah. Yeah. You remember only when you're in the midst of it again or something like that. But that it's a powerful analgesic.
It really works well too. I think that with pain, what's interesting, I have chronic pain and I treated a lot of pain. I mean, that's pretty much what I did for a career. And we're supposed to forget our pain. And sometimes our nervous system gets mixed up and we don't forget our pain, and it's a central sensitization kind of wind up central nervous system phenomenon. And I have found, and that's a really terrible place to be because then you're in a loop and it's a very difficult loop to break or cycle to break. And I have found oxytocin to be phenomenal for breaking that loop and getting people to a place where it's not that it's not like an opioid where you don't care about the pain. It's a calming down of the nervous system enough to move through the pain is how I've tried to explain it to my patients and what I've experienced personally. But can we take too much of it? Because I love it. I love it.
Well, and for FDA regulation purposes, we'll say it's only, exogenous oxytocin is only approved for stimulating labor and delivery right now, but it has so many far-reaching purposes, right? So off-label, we've been using it for sexual function, for pain, for nervous system and PTSD. And what you're the whole concept of what oxytocin does, it's like repaving those ruts and potholes of the roads of our life. It does go a long way to that. And the question, can we use too much of it? This is where I think we can get into some trouble because it's a power, if we're making oxytocin, it's just going to feed on itself and you're going to make more and more oxytocin. But if we're getting it exogenously, we may downregulate the receptors long term.
Yes.
So we want to take breaks, and pulsatile use of oxytocin, I think, is the safest way.
Yes, I use it when I need it. I
Yeah.
use it to get out of a rut, literally. So that was a great way to describe it. I use it when we have it compounded. This is a prescription item, and it comes in the compounded world. It comes in different various delivery systems. But I actually, just like I do with GLP-1s, I really like to keep everything as low a dose as possible and help patients utilize it, again, only as needed, because like you said, with receptors, we got to cycle things so that we don't, get receptor desensitization. But it really can smooth out those ruts. That's a nice way of putting it. Kind of gets you over the hump, if you will.
And if you add it, like, again, off label, but like oxytocin nasal spray with some ketamine in it for PTSD, trauma, when you're deep in those ruts, and also for pain, that combination of the two is like, I always describe it as, if you think of skiing on Christmas Day, at the end of the day, there's like all these tracks in the snow, but you look at that first snowfall, that fresh snowfall before anyone gets out there, and it's this lovely coating of snow. And I think that's what definitely oxytocin does, and the combination of oxytocin with ketamine too.
That's a great idea. Yeah, I hadn't considered that. I do find that oxytocin, like I said, it breaks that loop. It breaks that cycle. I just did a podcast that should have come out by the time this is recorded. And it was me talking about the pain trap, is how I refer to it. And I was really stuck in it. I had a pretty aggressive adjustment on my mid-spine, and it lit I've got some kind of funny wind-up pain phenomenon. It lit my whole spine up, and I was in a bad spot for about a month, and I could not get out. And I was in so much pain that I couldn't think straight. I probably should have reached out to you or any of my friends and asked for, guidance. But I was just, when you're caught in it, you can't breathe and you don't know which way to turn. And I finally caught a breather, and I immediately thought of oxytocin. And so I got my hands on some, and it doesn't take the pain away. It just, and I found this with patients too, it opens a window of, it's like you can finally breathe. And I'm such a fan when folks are in pain, whether it's acute pain or chronic pain, if they can move, if I can get them moving, then we get a window of opportunity. And that usually will start to lead them down the path to feeling better. And I think oxytocin has such a nice impact there. What is it doing in the brain in those cases? Because it almost feels like one of the reasons I love GLP-1s is because it quells neuroinflammation and it gives you some neuroplasticity. Does oxytocin have any capacity like that?
It does the same thing. Yes, it has the capacity to do the same thing. And again, I always think in the best pharmacy in the world, that is our own body. When we can produce oxytocin the best way, one of the things and it's hard when you're in those deep, dark pits of despair and pain and emotional and/or physical pain to tap into that. But there are powerful ways we can do that too. And I think remembering that there's always one next right step that we can take to lift ourselves up, or I like to say, pull ourselves up by our bootstraps.
Yes. So what are some of those ways? Because I have a whole list of them, but I want to hear your list too.
First was, my whole experience with oxytocin, and actually the oxytocin cortisol conversation. Like when cortisol goes up, oxytocin goes down. When cortisol is up for a long time, it signals the paraventricular nucleus to suppress cortisol. It's not that your adrenals fatigue, but it's a suppression of cortisol. But you're in this dangerous place physiologically where cortisol is low and oxytocin's low at the same time. And that's the physiology of disconnect. Physiology of burnout, say I'm burnout. Physiology of you go into a restaurant, you see a longtime friend, but you pretend you don't see them. Like, no one sees me, I see no one. Isolating, right? Yeah, no more trips to the grocery store during high traffic hours. That's it. Let me Instacart instead. And
so that's low oxytocin and low cortisol combo.
Typically that is. Yeah, I think it's physiology of divorce, physiology of depression. There's a lot that comes into this. And so when we're in those, and I learned from my own PTSD experience, and that sense, like I love my husband, but I don't feel love for him. I love my work. I don't feel like going in to the office again. That complete burnout in many aspects of life. And so as I started working on, this like awareness of this and started to work on increasing my own oxytocin, for me, it was going for walks on the beach. It was prayer and meditation and journaling. It was, really deepening my spiritual awareness and growth and things that I enjoy doing. And that with nutrition, addressing lifestyle. I mean, it's never just a one size fits all, but that with these other components really made a physiologic difference. So then I was like, okay, I can work out. I can, I can focus more. Like brain and cognition just lit up for me at that point. And so the different ways we can do it, like I talk to my patients about this all the time. Like, what are you doing for fun? What do you love to do that makes you happy? Do you have a pet? Because pets are a great way to increase oxytocin. Do you garden? Do you photo? I think I have a patient yesterday in my office. She's 72 and she just had a surgery for kidney cancer, and she's getting to the gym, but she can't. She's like struggling through her day, very depressed. So what do you enjoy doing that you haven't been doing for a while? And she loves photography. Like, can you get behind the lens? Can you do something like that? And that can make a huge difference. For one of my patients, it was her starting up dance lessons again. I mean, I fixed her like hormones, nutrition, detox, all these things that we do. But the thing that moved the needle for her was beginning dance lessons. And so like, things that you enjoy, and I sometimes will prescribe My Big Fat Greek Wedding. That movie is an oxytocin surgeon movie.
Mamma Mia too. I think Mamma Mia is a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Is this why people love going, like, is this why girls love getting together with other girls, like having girls time? I feel like women gathering together is another oxytocin booster.
It is. It absolutely is. And you think about the characteristics of the blue zones, or the areas where we have the longest living populations. Things that are characteristic of high oxytocin are characteristic within those communities, like having a faith-based practice, having longstanding marriages, having great family relationships or multi-generational households, getting out in nature, good community. All of those things help increase oxytocin. And, like, okay, well, what is it? Is it the getting out in nature? It's a combination of the things that I think, when we win, when oxytocin's winning, that improves our physiology top down.
So if we can elevate oxytocin, we should naturally get our cortisol to decline then. So we can use it as a lever.
We can use it as a lever, 100%. Like, I've worked on this area now since my own my PTSD, which began in 2006. And so I've worked on this and this concept, and with patients, whether, again, it's always lifestyle, nutrition, we're doing with hormones, and then how do we increase oxytocin naturally? And then if we need it exogenously, when are we adding it and for how long? But these things all, it works as a lever. And if we think so much of our even post-pandemic stress or during the pandemic stress, the isolation, that is that will level your cortisol. And then plus being inside and, flattening out or disrupting your circadian rhythm, like we're doing with blue light and EMF exposures. And so all of those things interrupt our circadian rhythm. And we talk a lot about stress management. I don't know about you, Tina, but when I hear stress management, I get stressed. Like, my physiology stresses out just thinking of stress management. But if we think about play, and I like to say microdose oxytocin throughout your day with oxyplay. So just ways to, bump up your oxytocin. Like we talk about 5-minute exercise snacks. What about 5-minute play snacks? And that really does move the needle. And we're going to work on supplements, nutrition, all that circadian reset, sunrises, sunsets, but things we can do to increase oxytocin move the needle the fastest. And people feel it, and their physiology shows. Inflammatory markers go down. It's powerful. Oxytocin is this great bonding hormone, but beyond that, it is a hormone of longevity, of immune support, of cognitive brain support, of cardiovascular support. There's so much that we are just finding out about, really the far-reaching powers of oxytocin as a neuropeptide hormone.